All right, welcome back to another episode of the Carbon Cardboard Podcast, talking Formula One and the Formula One card market. I'm your host, Bryan, Q3 Cards, joined with Scott from the F1 Castle. Nailed it.
Got him.
Got him. It only took 11 episodes or whatever number this is to not screw that up. We do this live, no editing. We're not live. I mean, I guess this is a recording for everybody else, but we're talking live. This is happening. This is real
Doing
world.
it live.
This is the real world here. And Scott, the world we're living in right now, Lando Norris, Formula One race winner.
Finally. No more Lando no wins. Now it's Lando one win.
Did you see the thing that people are still hanging on to that because it's plural, and so it's not no
Okay, so it's
wins?
no wins. Yeah, but that's not how that works.
Like, people have way too much time on their hands, like, for sure. But anyways, so you and the Queen were in Miami, so we're going to talk about that briefly. And I feel like every race you go to, there's just some really epic stuff that happens. So I'm going to pick your brain about that. But with Lando no longer no wins, winning has a pretty big impact on the Formula One card market. So we're going to talk about that in the end. And I don't think we talked about it last episode, but like right before that, you hit like a massive Lando Norris card. So if anybody follows you on Instagram, Scott, at F1 Castle, nailed it.
Got him.
They already probably know what we're going to talk about. But for everybody else that does not follow us on Instagram, make sure you watch this on YouTube so you can see that. Or if you are listening on Apple Podcasts, thank you. We're still looking for some reviews. We're only up to 6. All you have to do is hop on trickling in, give a 5-star review, a couple written ones. Just it helps get the signal out. And if you love Formula One and you love Formula One cards, like, you want to hang out with similar people. And that's like the vibe that I always say, Scott, that you've got at the F1 Castle, whether you're breaking on Instagram, whether you're breaking on Fanatics Live.
It's true. That's what we try to cultivate. It's a big gathering of people with similar interests, and Formula One cards, Formula One in general is what we do in the Formula One Castle, the F1 Castle, as it were. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
So a good example of that is Fanatics Live. They're recording this on a Wednesday. On Tuesday night, you did a Tuesday night single stream.
Yeah.
And Hunter from Fanatics Live hops in and said, "Hey, I'll give away a box of Topps Chrome if Scott can come up with a trivia question," which I thought was actually pretty good. I did pause for a second before you even got through all the criterion. All the Castleites already knew who you were talking about. Like that's just truly epic right there.
I know. And I mean, that just goes to show that it's true F1 fans, right? Who are hanging out in the castle. Because and for folks that weren't there in the live, basically there were just throughout the night, there had been kind of some issues with auction. I basically just had to keep refreshing over and over and over after every auction. So Hunter at Fanatics Live, shout out Fanatics Live. Appreciate it, Hunter. Threw in a 2023 hobby box. He said, come up with a trivia question. I'll give away a hobby box to whoever gets it right. And whoever gets it right first, because lots of people got it right. And so the trivia question I asked was, and I didn't even get through, like you said, all of the clues, but I said, name the driver who's in their first ever race got a podium. And then I was going to go on to say, who has never gotten a podium since. And the last clue is going to be, and they are Danish. And of course, that is Kevin Magnussen, and F1 Ben got it immediately. He even typed out Magnussen correctly. And there was a lot of people who chimed in, K-Mag and everything after Ben. So people got it pretty quickly, which was cool. It was cool to see, and awesome that they gave away a free box. Hopefully Ben gets a superfractor or something cool in that box. But yeah, that was pretty cool. And
hopefully
go ahead.
I was gonna say, hopefully he gets a Jack Doohan because he's probably one of the largest Jack Doohan collectors in the
Oh, yeah.
world, which is a good segue, my friend, to
That's
talk
true.
about Miami. So, like I said, you and the Queen and little Seb
That's right.
headed down to Miami, and it looks like you just had a grand old time. So I'm gonna turn the microphone over to you and just give it down. But like before we start, like I guess I got to start with this, just because like this was truly epic. Like on
Yeah.
screen here, we've
Yep,
got
so
Jack
we've got
doing.
that is Jack doing so basically, we found out before we headed down, Alpine, Formula 1 team, made a post that they were gonna be on Lincoln Road on Thursday, and Jack Doohan was gonna be at their pop-up shop. And we're like, "Oh, cool," and we kinda looked at where Airbnb was, and then we looked at where that was, and we're like, "Oh, it's like a 25-minute drive, like, I don't know. I don't know if we're gonna be there." So, as it happens, I mean, Thursday was the one day that because we got in on Wednesday. So Thursday was the one day that we really had to like do whatever. So actually Erica's brother, friend of the show, Benny, shout out, was in the area. So he was down in Florida. He was in the area and he headed over and met us for dinner. We went for an early dinner at 5 o'clock down near Miami Beach. We picked a little spot. You know, it was pretty cool walking around and everything. And, I, like, look down and I'm like, "Dude, we're on Lincoln Road." It's 5, like, 10 as we're about to eat, and their pop-up shop is, like, opening at 6 on Lincoln Road. I was like, "Oh my god." Like, "Dude, let's go over there. Let's see what's going on." So it's kinda we hadn't 100% planned on, like, "Oh, yeah, we're absolutely doing this," but we were like, "Hey, we're in the area, like, why not?" So we go over, and they have, kind of a replica car there of Gasly's car actually was set up, and then Jack Doom was set to arrive around like 6:15. So I sat down, I actually did a couple hot laps on the sim they had there. First lap was definitely a warm up lap, but then I actually put in a pretty impressive time in the second lap. So I was proud of that. And then we're kind of hanging out, and Jack shows up. They kind of go through, they had someone there kind of introduce him, ask some questions to Jack about, hey, what do you do like in the sim? Like, walk us through that. What is a race weekend like for you? And what are your aspirations? Obviously, to become an F1 driver. And so after that, he's there. They actually open it up to questions. And so there were some people there. This one girl asked, like, like, who is your favorite driver? And stuff like that. And then so I raised my hand, and I was lucky enough that they gave me the mic. And I do have to shout out F1 Ben again, because Jack doing streams on Twitch. He does, like, sim racing kind of stuff, streams on Twitch. And in one of his streams, Ben was kind of having a little conversation with him through the chat. And he had mentioned, that he had a cracked chassis for the first, I think it was like 6 or so races, basically until Baku. Like, they found out after Baku, they fixed it for Monaco. They fixed his chassis for Monaco. And Jack Doohan actually mentions, he's like, "Yeah, I did crash in Monaco, but like, whatever." So they fixed it for Monaco. So I asked him, I said, Jack, um, if you hadn't had a cracked chassis for the first third of the year, first half of the year, do you think you would have won the Formula 2 championship? And it was funny because the whole crowd is like, "Oh," and Jack's got, like, a big smile on his face, like, and so he answered it very well. I mean, Jack, honestly, he is like, whether he's either been trained or he is just really good at, like, PR and stuff in general, and it's not surprising because he's on F1 TV all the time in the post-race, breakdown with Will Buxton and folks like that. He is really good at answering questions. And so he danced around it a little bit in terms of saying, he's like, listen, I'm not going to say like something didn't happen, right? It didn't happen. So I can't say definitively like, oh, yes, I would have won the championship, not Teo Porcher. But he did mention that he outscored the rest of the field by 43 points once it was fixed. which is true. And so, that was pretty cool. And so then he did a signing, and you could see in that picture there that I picked up one of the Alpine bucket hats they had there, and I had it autographed, and I had him write to Ben, and then sign it, and then I got a little card. And it was funny. He's hilarious, man, because I'm in line. I'm like, yeah, you make it out to Ben. Um, and he's like, okay, great. He's like, what's the name again? I was like, Ben. He's like, okay, James. And I was like, no, 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 Ben. He's like, kidding, kidding. And I was like, oh, okay, that was good. That was good. Yeah. So that was awesome. So that'll be headed Ben's way. But yeah, so that was super cool. And that was on Thursday, getting to meet Jack Doohan, who, fingers crossed, we're hoping is gonna end up in F1 maybe as early as next year for Alpine. I told him on my way out, I was like, yeah, I'll give Bruno Femine a text and let him know to put you in the car. So yeah, pretty cool on Thursday.
All right, and I know you guys had really good seats. Obviously, it's a busy weekend. We're definitely focused on the card side of things. I know if anybody didn't see, you and the Queen were very active trackside, not trackside, but at the track, handing out cards. Just
Yep.
walk us through some of that again, because I feel like every race is probably a little bit of a different experience when it comes to that.
Yeah, so our seats, we were on the start finish straight. And, to get from where we were to the fan zone was actually like a 20-minute walk. And it would have been about a 10-minute walk if they had let us go over the turn one bridge, but they barred entry to the turn one bridge unless you had a paddock pass. And it's not like you go over the bridge and you're in the paddock. Like, you go over the bridge and you can go different ways. And like, you just weren't letting people on. I was like, oh my God, F1 Miami, I swear to God. But in the end, it was fine. I mean, we had a walk. It was hot, so I'd have to like take a breather after it, cool myself down. I was sweating quite a bit, profusely actually, because I'm from the Northeast up here in New York, so not used to the Florida heat. But so we would, after we did on Friday and Saturday, kind of in between sessions, we walked over to the fan zone, because that is where the Tops booth was last year. Now, Tops wasn't there this year. They didn't have a booth set up, so I was there kind of representing them, unofficially, but like representing them. And over the course of those 2 days and the final day, and I'll get to that in a minute, we gave out 6 boxes worth of 2023 Tops Chrome. So now we did this in a variety of ways. We would give packs to, mainly if you see like kids with their parents walking around, we go up to them, give them a wristband and a pack of cards. Or if we then kind of open some packs on our own and then split them up into like, okay, here are Perez cards, here are Hamilton cards, Max cards, etc. And then if we saw people like wearing, you know, a jersey, merchandise, shirt, whatever of a certain driver, certain team, we'd go up to them and kind of offer the cards up. So it was, I'd say 99% successful. There are a couple times, and I don't know, maybe language barrier issues or something. We go over to people and be like, hey, like we're giving away these cards, everything. They're like, no, no. And it's like, okay, sure. But almost the entire time, everyone was extremely happy. We actually had on a couple instances, like whole families that were like going crazy, like, oh my God, like they're free. This is crazy. And like they would come back. And I think one of the best experiences we had, and like this is quintessential, like why we do this and like what the hobby is about, is we gave this young kid who was wearing a Lewis Hamilton shirt, we gave him a Hamilton card and a pack. And he takes it, he runs over to his family, and his family's decked out in like Ferrari, McLaren. They kind of have like all the different teams. And so then his father comes over and he's like, hey, like this is really cool. The cards, can you tell me more about them? So I kind of told him, hey, like Topps makes these cards. They have ever since 2020, which came out in 2021. Then every year they produce a new set. And Fanatics Live is an area where you can kind of buy them and have them opened live for you and stuff. And I talked to him about my business a little bit. And he asked, like, do you have any Ferrari cards? I was like, yeah, absolutely. Gave him some Ferrari cards. And I was like, you a Schumacher fan? He's like, oh yeah. He's like, he wouldn't have any cards though. I was like, on the contrary. And I gave him like a speed demon. And it's fun too, because they're not tied up in the like, oh, is it a super fractor? Is it a red out of 5, orange out of 25? It's just like, it's a card of one of their favorite drivers. And so then he went back over, and then like his two daughters came over. They're like, "Oh, do you have any Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc?" And then like and so like I give them some cards, and I gave them some more packs. So then the best thing was they came back over with cards that they had opened from the pack, and they're like, "Hey, can I trade you for like, a Sergio Perez or whatever?" And like, I think the most lopsided trade is I took an Enzo Fittipaldi card for a Lewis Hamilton. I offered up a Lewis Hamilton for an Enzo Fittipaldi, but it was fun. I mean, and that was just awesome. Like they were trading, and we filmed the majority of it. Shout out to the Queen of the Castle, of course, my videographer on the majority of these excursions. But it was pure, right? Like almost like, just like a new collector experience, and it's something that, whether they end up getting into the hobby, fully fledged or not, it's something they'll remember forever, right? And even if they do, and they eventually get down the path of, they're collecting, reds of their favorite drivers, or, portrait PSA 10s or whatever, this will still be their first experience with the hobby. And it was so fun. And actually in the last day, because I was done with those 20-minute walks each way. We actually put up a table outside of the start finish straight. We put a table up, and I wish I'd given you a picture of this, but we put up a table and we had our cards set out, and I had stacks of all of the different drivers. I put them in different driver stacks. And so originally, like I kind of called some people over. I'm like, "Hey, you got some Leclerc gear on you, Leclerc fan?" Like, they came over. And then it doesn't take long, man. And this is the same thing that it was last year at the Tops booth. Like once a one or two people come over, then other people are like, "Oh, what's that over there?" And then the next thing you know, there's like 30 people around this table that I've got set up, and they're all like, "Oh, do you have Perez? Do you have Leclerc? Do you have Russell? Do you have this?" And we're just giving everything away. I mean, I was rifling through everything. We opened a new box. We were like opening packs, giving them away, like trying to get cards that people were asking for. And I was like, "I don't have any, but here, let me try to open up a pack and like see if we can get that driver for you." So it was really fun. And I mean, I picked up like 50 followers from it. So I mean, at least some of the people, and I actually had a few people share the story, or share on their story, like just found out about Formula One cards,
Mhm.
at the race. And like that is why I do this, right? And obviously when you're at a card show and you're doing this stuff, everyone knows about cards when you're at a card show. But when you're at a race, not everyone does. And, especially with Tops not being there this year, I wanted to make sure that Formula One cards had a presence. And everyone's always floored that they're free. People were like pulling their wallets out. They're like, "Oh, yeah, how much do I owe you?" And everything. I was like, "No, no, no, no." I'm sure I could easily sell them, until I get kicked out for, not having a vendor license selling stuff in there. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. It's always a lot of fun giving cards away. Especially to kids. Kids are just like, it blows their mind. And they're always so into it. And you know what really makes me happy is the kids, when you give them cards, maybe 2 seconds after you give them the cards, they turn it over and they look at the back and they start reading the back. And like that just like warms my heart, because like that reminds me of me as a kid, with baseball, basketball, whatever cards, like obviously you've got the image on the front, which is beautiful, and that's what you're going to see. But like you're going to get the detail on the back. You're going to read about where, they've won races. You're going to read, descriptions of the car. You're going to read, who came in second and third in a given race, and like what their lap times were. Like it's just it's cool, it's interactive, and it's why we do this. It's literally why we do this. So yeah, that was amazing. And that was kind of the 3 days of us giving those cards away.
Wow. Awesome. So you didn't have that bad seats. I got the image on
Yeah.
screen here. You've got the right before the race here. Like you can see all the drivers. I mean, you can see
Right.
Lando, you can see Carlos. Um, geez, you
Max.
even as close. You can see one of our ex president on the top left screen here.
Oh my
Eh,
god, I actually didn't even realize that until just now. It's true.
So I mean, it was a star-studded event, and I mean the race itself, Scott. For my money, I think it was one of the best races of the season so far, like, in terms of
Well,
the
I
action, like,
I
we saw.
I feel like you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who didn't think it was one of the best races. And the reason I say that is because not just because Max didn't win, right? Because Max didn't win Australia, but this was a much better race than Australia. Like I was there in Australia as well, and it was really exciting when Max's car broke down. you know, but outside of that, it was a little bit processional, and this was anything but, right? I mean, there were a lot of different overtakes, and then there was a lot of different strategies, and that is something we saw in Australia. But here there was a lot of different strategies, and then the VSC, and then the subsequent safety car really played a role. And I think that was, it was so funny because I went to the bathroom, and I try not to, like, I try to always go to the bathroom beforehand, but I really had to go. So I go to the bathroom. The second I leave, literally, the second I exit the grandstand, I hear, and K Mag and Sergeant make contact, and the safety cars coming. I'm like, you're kidding. So like I missed that little bit, and I come back in. I'm like, oh my god. I'm like, Lando hasn't pit yet. I was like, oh boy. I was like, he is in the front. He's in the front row. He's got a chance. He's got a shot. And, it was interesting being there live, witnessing all the different storylines. Like we saw right at the beginning, Sergio Perez almost take out Max. Like, oh my God. And we saw that like right there. And everyone was like, like, dude, he
Hmm.
was like an inch away from just blowing the race wide open. But Oscar Piastri had settled in, looking like he was going to be on the podium and up there with signs. And then they pit kind of following each other, and it opens up the door for some other guys. And Lando, qualifying just kind of didn't get it in the right window on his qualifying lap. So started a little bit further back. And then, with the whole like Perez having to check up and everything, he got stuck a little bit. He was behind Perez. But once he was in free air, he was the fastest car on the track. Like he was the fastest car on the track. And I think the safety car definitely played a role in him winning. Um, but I think he would have had a shot potentially to win, at least to get a podium, even without it, with the pace that he was able to unlock, because he was going to go long and just start pumping in it. I mean, you saw it. He was on old medium tires, fastest lap, fastest lap, fastest lap, like one after another. And it was like, oh my God, his pace is insane. And then the safety car came, and it was like, oh, baby. And yeah, I mean, Max went for that lunge at turn one and didn't get it. And that was it. That was it. I mean, Lando just had more pace than Max. So yeah, it was awesome. I mean, people know me, know I like Max, but Lando is one of my absolute favorites. And I was rocking the Norris jersey that day, and it was really cool to see him win in person for his first win ever.
So, watching at home, it was very nail biting, and it was weird too because when the safety car picked up Max instead of Lando, and I think Lando had just
Yeah.
passed the straight, so,
Missed
like, I
by
think.
20 meters, they said. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was very fortuitous for him, but,
Yeah.
they said Max had some floor damage from hitting the bollard, earlier on, which I think that was the virtual safety car because they had to get that off the track.
Yeah.
But, like, I remember watching the race, and I was telling my wife, I was like, "This is huge." Like, for this, and Lando had just gotten in the lead, and it really felt inevitable, like Max was gonna come and take it again. But when Lando kept opening the gap and opening the gap, like, A, you could either tell something was wrong with Max's car, or like the McLaren was just loving, like you said, that free air, like,
Mhm.
out, and he just kept extending it. And every time there was a couple more laps, Scott, that went by, I was like, this is a reality. Like, you mentioned it, like, Lando, you're hard pressed to find anybody that does not like Lando Norris. Like, he may not be everyone's favorite driver, but as in the sport, you just saw it. Every single driver, like, from Max was probably more excited for Lando winning than him winning any race
Yeah.
himself.
Yeah.
Leclerc gave him a hug. I mean, Russell came over. Lewis made a point to wave to him on track. Alonso came up. Carlos, Carlando, like that whole bromance, like it was just huge. It was always, I feel like, and I'm sure you feel like it too, like it was always going to be inevitable. He was eventually going to get his first win, but like I think on merit, he may have actually had a chance on this one regardless. And I think it makes it even more special. But I mean, I don't know how much you saw when you were there, but I'm sure you watched a lot of it replay. But like just the pure raw emotion, like the crowd chanting like Lando,
Oh
Lando,
yeah.
like him
Everyone.
getting out of the car, he's, putting his fist in the air. You can just tell he's so relieved. And I'll never forget it. Like him running over to his team and he just jumped into their arms and they just were, pumping him up in the
Trust leap.
air. Like exactly. Like it was just so awesome. And then the podium and the first time doing the champagne, smash on the ground
Yeah.
as a winner.
Well, it was funny because we watched the podium. We saw the podium presentation, and I mean, Max gave him a bath. Dude, Max used every ounce of champagne on Lando's face. Like literally, Lando didn't even get an opportunity to like smash it down until after Max and Leclerc had like doused him entirely. Like he just got an absolute bath. But it was so cool to see. And like, right, like I said, we were right there on the start finish straight. So we got to see him like get out of the car, like you said, like pump his fists in the air. And then even after the fact, it was awesome. Like, they were slated to leave as is usually the case. They were slated to leave that night, to head out Sunday night. And so he's in one of his press conference, like doing a little thing with Sky Sports, and Zach Brown comes up behind him, and he's like, "Hey," and they made some joke about like his ribs, and he's like, "You ready for tonight?" And he was like, I don't know, whatever. And Zach's like, plane leaves tomorrow. We leave tomorrow morning. And Lando, like, it was so funny because just got like a giddy smile. And he does that thing he does. He's like, like that little, like, he was like, okay. Like he's like, oh, we're going to go out. And like, it sounds like he went out and they had a good time. And Max was even saying, they were in the post race press conference, and Max, by the way, hilarious. Some of the comments he made, which I won't say on here. But Max was saying there were a couple things. He mentioned that, he didn't feel like he had damage on the car after hitting the bollard. He was putting in the same lap times. But he also said, like, after the start, like I tried to go for Lando, didn't get him at turn one, and then just didn't have the pace to, really challenge. He said, so I kind of just sat back and settled in for P2. So, I mean, I don't think the gap was as large as what ultimately it ended up being. I think they were actually pretty close. And Horner came out and said later that he thinks the Ballard, they think back at the factory, cost him like a quarter of a second a lap,
Mhm.
which I think would have made them really, really close to each other. And you got to think if Max has an undamaged car and this is like a battle for the championship, we see Max go all out and it's like an epic battle all the way to the end. But the weird phenomena about racing, and you only really get this feeling if the driver you like, that you're rooting for in general, is in the lead. Because what's unique about racing is that you can have as big a lead as you want, and it does not guarantee victory. In football, you know, in American football, if you're up 63-10 in with 3 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, the game is over. There
Mhm.
is no conceivable way that that game ends without the team with 63 points winning. But in racing, you could have a 40-second lead with 2 laps left. And if someone crashes and it gets red flagged, or a safety car comes out, or if you have a mechanical issue, like there is jeopardy and you could really feel it. It was tense, man. Like he's up by 6 seconds. And, normally if we see Max ahead by 6 seconds, it's like, oh, okay, no, turn the TV off. There's 5 laps left. It's, there we go. Race is over. But with Lando, everyone was like holding their breath, man. And I swear and they're showing on the screen like some of the battles at the back. And oh my god. Like, dude, when Oscar and Carlos like almost took each other out, there was like an audible collective gasp by the entire crowd. Everyone's like, and then like the radio came out and like, he's like, Oscar, Lando is leading. So we really don't want to crash, right? Because that could just all of a sudden, all the work you've done and getting the restart right and everything could just be taken away. And so those last laps were, like you said, they were nail biting. Even though he had a lead, and he was continuing to pull out a larger and larger lead over those last, 18 laps, it was still like edgier seat stuff because you just never know. And I think just with how much was on the line, not only was it someone who wasn't Max winning, but it was Lando, who, like you said, universally well liked. And it was his first win that he was
Mm.
going for, right? And like, the whole thing with Sachi back in 2018 and like everything about like, oh my God, like, he can't get the monkey off his back. Everyone's waiting for something to go wrong. And it never did. And that was amazing. And that was awesome. And it was a lot of fun to be there and witness it, and to just like the tension was palpable, and it made him crossing the finish line just like all that more wonderful. I absolutely went nuts when it happened, and yeah, couldn't be happier for him. Really cool. And really cool for the hobby, like you were saying.
So let's transition into talking about what this means for Lando. So to be quite honest, like Lando's market had been kind of stagnant. Like I think
Yeah.
especially we talked at our very early episodes, the hype about Oscar Piastri coming into these 2023 products, rookie card. Um, yeah, a lot of people, myself kind of included, thinking he is like a Max Verstappen talent, which I think that is not something that should be thrown around way lightly at all. But I mean, everyone was focusing on Oscar, and then like the Lando spots, like although one of the top at least 10, at least maybe top 6 valuable spots and say a break, whether it was driver most expensive if paired with Oscar and McLaren team spot, but like it was kind of the afterthought. I mean, he coming into what his 5th season here, didn't have a win yet, 15-ish podiums, I think. Yeah.
Right around
So
there.
very successful, but also getting to the point too where what is it ever going to happen when you've got that many, race starts, podiums, and you're in a car that's not a Red Bull
Right. And Max is still around.
and Max is still around? Is like, was it ever going to happen? And man, it did. And I want to first start with not really bearing the lead here, because I do want to talk about this massive car that you hit in the F1 Castle, and then just kind of talk about what we're seeing since, like a before Miami 2024 and after Miami 2024. I think it's going to be kind of important for his market
Yeah.
because Scott, I mean, the narrative has changed now. Like he is a race winner. There's very few people out there that can say that. I
Mhm.
mean, McLaren had an image that they shared on Instagram the other day about all the race winners that they've had. It's what, 22 or something like that. It's kind
Oh
of
my god,
crazy.
it is a lot, yeah.
But I mean, some legends in there, like with Senna
Senna,
and Prost and uh,
Hamilton.
Hamilton, Alonso, just and now Norris. But I'm gonna throw this on screen, and I just want to talk through the story of how it all went down, and now where this happened before Miami. It certainly means a lot more
Yeah.
after.
Yeah, so this was, like I said, the race was on what, the 4th, 5th? When was the race? What was Sunday? The 5th?
5th.
The
Yep.
5th, right? So, I ran a couple breaks. I ran a chrome break and a sapphire case break basically the night before we left. And so we left on Wednesday, so it was Tuesday night. And ran those breaks, and then after that, my man Dave's Cards, back after his little hiatus during tax season, um, wanted to do some Percy's. So he started doing some Chrome Percy's, whatever, did pretty good. I think he hit a Nigel Mansell out of 25 auto, which is cool. And then he was like, yeah, you know what? I'll take a shot at Sapphire. He's always loved Sapphire. So typical Dave, takes boxes 3, 5, and 9. Don't forget 9. 3, 5, and 9. And then, the new 3 and 5. And he goes, oh, you pick 2, and like I pick 2, and like whatever. And then there's 2 left. He's like, yeah, just finish them. So I think was it in the last box? It was either in the last box or the second to last box. But I'm opening it and I see, and now, I mean, it is extremely obvious when you hit one, but I see like the golden discs in Sapphire. And
Mhm.
dude, they stand out like crazy, in Sapphire especially. And, you know, kind of building it up and everything. And, I'll be honest, I had seen the tiny bit of orange on his pants that you can see down there on the bottom. And I didn't even really try, but it just, just the way the card came out and everything. So I knew it was Lando. And I knew that the portrait had already been hit. So I already knew what card I was about to unveil. So I was kind of playing it up. I was like, oh no. I was like, yeah, you guys may have heard of this young kid, Lando Norris, and kind of just like unveiled it. And like the Lando Norris 2023 Sapphire Selection Superfractor autograph comes out, and Dave's going nuts, whole chat's going nuts. And this was, a few days before the race. And so then obviously we get to the race, and, I was talking to Lando before the race. And I was like, hey man, I just hit like your biggest card in 2023. And he was like, all right, I'll go out and make sure we get a win for you. And I was like, no, I'd really appreciate that. So, it was great that he could bring it home for the F1 Castle. But no, it was awesome. I mean, like I said, I'm a massive Lando fan, regardless of his win or not. So pulling this card was legendary even before the win, and then just having him win the weekend right after I pulled it just made it all that much sweeter. So yeah, was pretty legendary. Card, I mean, already has offers at and over $20,000. So it's a big time card for sure, especially after that win.
Wow. And having seen the Max Sapphire Selection Superfractor in person as well recently, just
Yep.
graded by PSA. You're right. It's absolutely stunning. Like, I think even just the base Sapphire selections are
Oh yeah.
considerably underrated. Do not scoff at the fact that it's not numbered or anything. They're still going to be super rare. There's only like 80 or 80.
76.
Yeah, it's something really low that in the grand scheme of things, the first time they've done this. I mean, you're seeing this across a lot of Topps products this year, but it doesn't matter. We're here for the Formula One, and it looks fantastic. So
Absolutely.
good on Dave. Pre-Miami, post-Miami, Scott, understandably, everyone's kind of got Lando fever. Once you win,
Oh
you
yeah.
change the narrative. Everyone's like, okay, I want a good Lando card if I don't have one already. We were just looking at 130point.com. If you have not used that site before, highly recommend it. You just type in whatever you're looking for, give it as much detail as you think it needs, and it will give you eBay comps. It'll even also do PWCC. Golden auctions are also pulled in there. A
Yep.
good barometer, Scott, for looking at values is, again, you mentioned it when you're talking about at the race with the different people learning about the cards, that obviously 2020 is the litmus test for a lot of values, especially a driver that had a card in 2020, especially a driver like Lando Norris, that's his rookie card. Base refractors in 2020 are not to be scoffed at. There's only about 1,100 of them total. And when you grade them at PSA, the gem rate is actually fairly low. Some of them still do have the clipping on the back left and the back right, what we'll call like chrome bubbles or scratches. Like, it's very difficult to get a PSA 10 in that. So we'll use a PSA 10 as kind of the gauge of the best of the best when you're talking about those refractors. Lando market was very subdued prior to this. I think we saw what, $150 for a PSA 10
Yeah, I think like
most recent.
150. I think it had crept up to like maybe like 200. 200 was the most recent sale just before the race. I think it was actually just before the race, like on the 3rd. So it was on like the Friday. Um,
And
maybe
at the
200.
height, I would say those were probably more like a $400 card, at the
Yeah,
when we were 4 to 600, sometimes at one point, that was like a $1,000 card, but that was like the height
back in
of
the
the
crypto bubble.
the crypto bubble, the COVID bubble. $600, the same card sold for, not that card, but a similar card and similar grade, $600 after the race.
Yeah. I mean, PSA 10 refractor, like you said, it's the litmus. It's interesting because, I know especially when we had done previous episodes of the cards formula, that was always what we looked at was 2020 PSA 10, because not only was that recent, but it was just kind of like the standard. Now we're so far removed. We have had 3 sets since 2020 that I almost feel like, I think there's like 2 barometers, right? And I would say I still think refractor PSA 10 portrait from 2020 Chrome is like the key barometer. Like you said, $200 on Friday, $600 on Sunday. So that's a 3x,
Mhm,
over getting his first race win, which I think is important. Not only is it his first race win, but it's a recent first race win, right? I mean, we saw Signs Market, you know, get a jump when he won in Australia. It wasn't his first win, but it was his first recent win. Recent
mhm,
wins matter. Just like in any other sport, right? Someone drops 50 points in basketball, like they're going to get a bump. And it's the same way in Formula One. You get a podium, you get a win, especially, you're going to see a bump. And Lando's definitely gone up. And I think, it might behoove people to also look at, I would say the best barometers are, like you said, PSA 10, Chrome, Portrait. And then I would also say something like, a gold sapphire portrait of the current year,
mhm,
of because if I were to pull the entire F1 Castle community, and I've got a lot of folks who have been around since 2020, a lot of them, right? Because I've basically been doing this since the 2020 product came out. But I would absolutely put money on the fact that more community members in the F1 Castle are collecting 2023 than 2020 right now. And that's just because it's new. It's not, you're not going to spend thousands of dollars to get it. 2020 is becoming a little bit harder to get, and I think a PSA 10 refractor, $600, it's not, walking around money. It's a significant purchase, but it's also not thousands and thousands. So I think, if you have that disposable income and you can put it somewhere, it's not a bad place to put it. This is not financial advice, by the way. But something that's a little bit cheaper, more affordable is going to be whatever the current year is. And I really like kind of like the sapphire gold portrait. And we've seen his market, 2, 3x in that same price point. He had a gold sapphire portrait go for like $25, a few weeks ago, and one just sold for 75. So his market is going up all over the place across the board, which is good to see. So, yeah, I mean, I think Lando potentially could get more wins this season, right? I know McLaren just brought, 9 or 10 upgrades to Lando's car. Oscar only got about half of them, so he'll be getting the rest in Imola, but they are right up there. Like they have moved ahead of Ferrari pace wise, and Lando was the fastest car on the track. And another thing that I think is positive, if you're a McLaren fan or Lando, Oscar in general, is that Stella said that they did not think the Miami track would suit their car or their upgrades. They just had them ready, so they wanted to bring them to get more data to use them in Imola, which where they think will suit their car. So if
mhm.
we just had a race where they didn't suit the car and it's one of the fastest cars on track, you got to imagine they're going to be really good in Imola. Now, of course, Ferrari and Red Bull are not going to stand still. They'll be bringing upgrades throughout the year as well. They'll punch back. But I think McLaren is, they were kind of solidly, like we said on an earlier podcast, like sitting in that third place spot, you know, too far away from Ferrari, but way ahead of, Mercedes and Aston Martin. I think they're in the mix now. They are in the mix for podiums, for potential race wins, and that's exciting. I mean, imagine a season where it's not just Max winning. I mean, I'm smiling. I'm getting excited just even thinking about it. So I'm looking forward to Imola.
Yeah, it's been although Max has been fairly dominant, I still think it's been a overall enjoyable season so far, and I think
Oh,
what we'll see going forward. But there's a couple things too. Just to, I think you mentioned the cards formula, which was our prior podcast that we also had Chris and TC on as well. Famously, I know I'm looking on screen here as I've got my Ferrari sweatshirt on here, and I know famously we're like, Charles Leclerc is the best thing since sliced bread, and his market was like taking off. One of the things that you can also do too is if you're a longer term collector, is don't get that FOMO, because like everyone is going to be chasing Lando right now. If you're a
right.
Lando fan, you probably already had a few cards. Maybe you can sell high in a few and then condense down, but don't feel compelled to jump in if you don't have one, because inevitably his market will come back down. Like, he won't win every race here. The hype, the shininess will wear off a little bit. I mean, we saw it with Leclerc in 2022.
Yep.
At one point his cards were rivaling Max's, and now he's a distant, very far from there. So again, not necessarily financial advice, but as always, and one of the reasons why we do this is about the collecting, the longer term view about some of this stuff. There's always going to be a new set. We've got new products. Um,
Yeah.
just be smart about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Proceed with caution. And you make a good point too, right? The first win, and like I said, first recent win, there's going to be that first win bump, right? And then it probably will come back down. I think if we see like say Imola, he finishes fourth, you know, it won't be $600 for a PSA 10, right? It'll be 450 or something. It'll come back down. The only way, the only way that I think his market goes up from here is not if he wins in Imola, not if he wins in Great Britain or Spain, but if he keeps winning, if he wins all of those, and all of a sudden he's challenging Max for the championship. That's the only way. And like that's no easy feat. So I think you're right. This may be like the height of the Lando market for now. So if you've got some stuff, might not be a bad idea to sell. But if you don't have anything, maybe look around, find something that you like though, and be mindful of not overpaying. But yeah, the only way his market goes up from here is if he emerges as a genuine title contender, because we don't have one of those right now. Right now, it still is Max and everyone else. I mean, if you look at the drivers' championship, I mean, there's no one that is challenging Max right now. Like Max is literally, I think, like as far as driver standings, like Max has what, like 130 something points, 136 points, and Perez is still next with 103. He's 33 points behind. And Lando's way down with 83, right? Lando would have to win, like 4 races in a row. And even if Max comes in second, all those races, Max is still ahead. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Now I'm getting myself excited for just to see Lando just go on a streak here.
I mean, you just got me thinking here. It's like back in 2021 when we had the Lewis and Max battle. Imagine at some point that materializes throughout the season, that we've got and
Oh,
potentially even a 3-way battle if Leclerc um
yeah.
is in there as well. It's a great time to be a Formula One
Perez,
fan.
Sainz.
Yeah, for
It is.
sure. It's
One of my bold predictions before the year was that we were going to have 6 different drivers win from 4 different teams. So far, we have 3 different drivers from 3 different teams. So all we need is Perez, I'm sure, is going to get a victory at some point. And then, give me a victory from Lewis or Russell, and then like a Leclerc victory or an Oscar victory, and we're there. And all of a sudden, this season, which started as, oh my God, this might be more dominant than 2023, which was one of the most dominant seasons ever, turns into this epic everybody winning season, and so Red Bull, please don't bring any upgrades. Let us have this for a while.
So much for what we thought was going to be a very short episode, but I mean,
Never is.
everyone loves Lando. I
It's
mean,
true.
it was just a fun way to chat. So I guess before we call it quits on this episode, Scott, what do you got coming up in the castle?
So still chugging away. 2023 Chrome and 2023 Sapphire. I think I have cases up right now. Probably going to run those Friday night. And then, guys, the singles on Fanatics Live have been absolutely awesome. We're going to be doing more of those. Right now, it's been like a once per week kind of thing. We're going to be scaling that up. We're going to be running 2 shows a week. So we're going to have a ton of those going on. Sunday is kind of, always going to be one of the days. And then, like either probably Wednesday, maybe either Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. It'll probably be like something in the middle of the week and then something on Sunday. And then probably start doing some small random team stuff on Fanatics Live as well. Want to try to keep growing the community there. We've gotten a lot of new folks into the Formula One hobby from Fanatics Live, actually. Like baseball, football, soccer fans who are on there for other stuff and are like, oh, what's going on over here? And I'm pretty much the only one who's doing anything with Formula One on Fanatics Live. There were a couple people early on when the products first came out that ran a bunch of stuff there, and now there isn't. I'm the only one who's running anything on there. So trying to carry the carry the F1 flag as always, right? So we're doing what we can over there. We're gonna continue to bear the flag. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Nothing crazy coming up. I will do a tiny tease though, and I don't know exactly when it's gonna happen. But we got 2020 Dynasty case in just the other day. So
Spicy.
yeah, it's gonna be coming up at some point. Not sure when I'm gonna do it. I don't know if I'm gonna hold it all the way until Vegas again or something, but it's coming. It's coming.
Very cool. That's a very good tease. So let's cut this thing off before it gets going far too much longer because you and I both love to talk. We both love to talk
Always.
about Formula One. So, all right, Scott, my friend, let's bring this thing home.
All right, everyone. Well, collect your cardboard and keep it carbon.